tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that.
Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from Moneyball, the movie.
Billy Beane has tried to reinvent a system that's been working for years. It was a nice theory, just not working out.
How long is Billy Beane going to last?
He's proven himself right out of a job.
With the help of our special guest, Linedata CMO, Scott Greenwald. Scott, how are you?
Doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on the show. Excited to chat Moneyball, Linedata, your thoughts on marketing, and everything in between. So why the heck did you pick Moneyball to talk about today?
First of all, just great movie in general, right? If you forget the aspects that relate back to marketing, just a great movie to watch, great lesson. You know, it's kind of like The Underdog, which is a very American story behind it, trying to fight the Yankees and the Red Sox and all those big market teams, and having him do as well as he did for many years as an underdog was pretty amazing.
Are you a baseball fan?
I am. I'm a big Astros fan, though, not an A's fan. But, the Astros didn't really compete that much with the A's, so no animosity with any A's fans out there.
I know, right? Yeah, I'm an A's fan. I grew up an A's fan. I grew up in Oakland, and I lived through Moneyball, so I have many thoughts. And I think it's also sort of worth just noting before we, dig into Moneyball is, so A, I grew up in Oakland, huge A's fan. We would it was part of the culture of you go to A's games. I did like baseball at that time. I just don't really care as much anymore. And then we lost the A's. So, but I think, so for me as a kid growing up, so the A's, it was so cultural. We would gather at A's games. You'd go to the parking lot and you go to A's games. Wednesdays were $1 tickets, $1 hot dogs. And so so I mean, you could get all your friends. Yeah, we used to, in second inning, you meet in section 222. And all of my friends would go there and stuff. I have a great story where my car got stolen at an A's game. And then my dad drove around in East Oakland and found it the next day. So I have lots and lots and lots of A's memories going to all that sort of stuff. And what's interesting going to thinking about Moneyball is we didn't know Moneyball was happening. We just knew the owner was a cheap ass, right? So that's part of looking at it back when we would be every year the A's would lose their best players and they would go sign with someone else for lots and lots of money. It was devastating as a fan base. And we'll get into this here a little bit later, but just the idea that Moneyball came out of a necessity to compete. Whereas, and I'll tease this, that one of the takeaways is, but if you actually had a good owner, we would have been the best team in baseball. And it's that's the big difference is it's something that's really exciting to discuss, and we'll dig into it. But anyways, I'm pumped to talk.
Yeah, you sit there and he's got, this guy just won you 100 whatever games that previous season. And, and he's coming to you, you're getting, pulled apart in every direction. He's I just need a little bit more money. He's proven to you that he can do a lot with a little. You think the owner would stretch himself a little bit, right? But didn't seem in the movie, obviously it's a movie, but didn't seem to care at all about whether he won or lost.
Just look at their payroll for the past 20 years. He didn't care. He still doesn't care. He never cared. And I think that this is a super important part. In startup world, if you had the quote unquote traction that the A's had in, with the Jason Giambi and Miguel Tejada, consistently cranking out all these pitchers, all these players, and doing the Moneyball stuff. If you were that startup, VCs would go crazy to invest in you. But when you have someone who doesn't understand when to turn the money on, that's the thing. Moneyball actually does require money at some point. this is how the Red Sox went and won the World Series after using the Moneyball playbook, right? So
and they applied both parts of it, the strategy and the money to it. Yep.
That's exactly right. And that's the part that was so frustrating as a fan. And I think it really does impact. Part of this is about your customers, right? Like the customers of the A's are the fans. And like part of being a fan is the players and having them stay. It's not just about winning. Like it's because the chance that you actually win a World Series is really low, especially if you're a small market team with small budget. But part of what keeps you there is that feature. And the feature is it's my favorite player. And when your favorite player leaves every single year, that does not help, right? Like players come for winning and their fans come for winning and they come for players, right? And so as soon as you start to degrade that foundation, all of a sudden you've lost a key component of what makes your product great.
Yeah. Well, I think too, the fact that you guys lost to the Twins, another pretty small market team, right? Had they lost to the Yankees 2 years in a row, I feel like at some point you said, look, we can beat everybody else. We just can't beat the team that's got $80 to $100 million more in roster than we do. Maybe there's some movement there, but they did lose to a small market team too that was not applying his strategy or approach. So
that's right.
Yeah, you would think somebody at some point, and in the movie they kind of knock all the traditional approach of the scouts and everything else. You got to admit, I mean, the scouts did their job too. They brought in some good talent, developed. Pena came up from the minor leagues. I mean, they were doing a decent job. He was just trying to bring a different approach that would complement what they were already doing. I think in the movie, for obvious purposes, they kind of put them, butting heads throughout it. But I got to think some credit goes to the scouts as well.
Meredith, what the heck is Moneyball?
So we've talked a little bit about it already, but Moneyball isn't just a Brad Pitt movie about baseball, but it's a story really of how tuning into data and making decisions using that data can give you a strategic and winning edge that no one else really sees. So it's the story of kind of an invisible advantage.
If we win with this team, we'll change the game.
Moneyball was originally a 2003 book written by Michael Lewis called Moneyball, The Art of Winning an Unfair Game. And it's about the Oakland A's trying to put together a baseball team on a tiny budget that could actually stand up to teams with much, much more money.
There are rich teams and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us.
Lewis had come up with the idea because, first off, he loved the A's since he was a little kid. But as an adult, he became fascinated with what he called class warfare on the field. And that is the difference in how much players on the same team were being paid and then how much other teams were also able to pay their players. And one thing became clear. He said, the A's had no money and they were playing against teams with all this money. And that made me curious because they were doing really well. If the market for baseball players was efficient, the team with the most money should just buy all the best players and win all the games. That seemed to be a question worth trying to answer. That's when he called Billy Beane, the GM of the Oakland A's, and told him he was thinking of writing a magazine piece on them. And Lewis said that after spending just a day with Beane, he knew he had a big story on his hands. He said it became clear that the A's were doing things differently than everybody else. It turns out Billy Beane had been inspired by the work of Bill James, who came up with the idea for something called sabermetrics. The term comes from the acronym SABR for the Society for American Baseball Research. And sabermetrics are statistics, which is like tracking things like batting, pitching, and fielding. And Beane was also at the same time working with this baseball executive named Paul DePodesta, who advocated for the use of analytics in baseball. In the movie, Billy Beane partners with a character named Peter Brand, who's sort of this composite character. He's not a real person. He's played by Jonah Hill, and he's loosely based on Paul DePodesta. And in the movie, Peter Brand says that it's a way to find value in players that nobody else can see. People are overlooked for a variety of biased reasons and perceived flaws: age, appearance, and personality. So the movie stars Brad Pitt as Billy Beane, Jonah Hill as Peter Brand. It was directed by Bennett Miller, and the screenplay is by Steven Zalian and Aaron Sorkin.
Your goal shouldn't be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins. And in order to buy wins, you need to buy runs.
Who are you?
I'm Peter Brand.
First job in baseball?
It's my first job anywhere.
And it was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and best adapted screenplay. But a couple of things that I wanted to point out is like how the Oakland A's were thinking about things differently. Billy Beane was thinking about things differently. Scott, I'm wondering how you are thinking about applying that to marketing, and if you saw other marketing lessons to take away from Moneyball.
Yeah, great question. So look, I've not, right now, Linedata is a $180 million business, right? A software business from France. So we're trying to establish ourselves in North America the last probably decade. I've done a good job of that, but I've worked for the Yankees before. I was at Lockheed Martin and I was at Leidos, where we had very large sales organizations. I mean, a marketing organization. Heck, I was as a Dell way back when, right? So you talk about a marketing company that sells computers. So now I'm challenging a different environment. I'm a small market, and you have to look at things differently, right? You can't come in here and say, I'm going to transform this marketing organization into what I had before. I'm not going to have the number of talent people. I'm not going to have the quality and quantity of employees. I'm not going to have the budget for sure, right? So you have to do your best at analyzing what you have very quickly. You have to assess the talent pool. You have to review the best way of spending the marketing budgets you have. You also have the challenge of dealing with the company and how they've done things traditionally, right? And you quickly realize this is not what you would do at a larger company. This is not what you should do from the perspective of, lead generation being a huge part and tracking ROI and pipeline generated by marketing. Those are things that they had not previously done before I came on board. And when I pitched my services to the CEO, who's also our founder, that's kind of what sold him. He was very interested in hearing this change of approach and marketing and working much closer to the sales organization. So, that's why also the movie was particularly interesting to me is at some point you're with the Yankees and you see like, this is great, but you can't do anything wrong when you're the Yankees, except lose the World Series, right? Because there is that expectation all the time. So coming here, it was a great challenge for myself to kind of say, like, let's see what I've made of, let's see what I've learned over the years. You try to bring some of those best practices, adapt them to the environment that you're in. And that's what we're dealing with now. You do get rid of some players, right? And it's not that they were bad players. They just didn't fit into the system that I was trying to establish. And you bring some, you keep some, you kind of, work to see what they've got, how they can adapt to the system, which I did in terms of what they were focused on before versus what I wanted them to focus on. And then you bring on some new people. In my case, it was some young players, right? I brought in an intern that's now been here 5 years, as long as I have. And he's doing a fantastic job, been promoted twice, and a few other players. And you try to bring the team together and it's working nicely, right? It is challenging every day because we are going up against some much larger vendors out there, multi-billion dollars and are probably US based and established, but we're doing a pretty good job of putting a dent into the market.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's incredible.
I think the first piece here that Moneyball addresses is first, like just taking a look at yourself and all the sacred cows and all the ways that people like attribute value to something that is not based in fact or sort of like reality, right? So I think like the first thing that they did was like say, okay, everyone is looking for a 5-tool prospect, right? That's like the goal, right? Looking for a 5-tool prospect. Yep. And actually, we have a really good example of this right now with the Oklahoma City Thunder, who just won a championship. So they said, okay, everybody is looking for this. So we have an equal chance as everybody else to look for this 5-tool prospect. But every single other team does this way. Their scouts do it this way. Everyone is looking for this. They're all looking for this. If we're trying to compete asymmetrically, we have to look for something else. Like, is there a way that we could, not play the same game that they're all playing?
We're going to shake things up. Why don't you walk me through the board?
I believe there's a championship team that we can afford because everyone else undervalues them, like an island of misfit toys.
Because once we create if we win the lottery, right? If we find the 5-tool prospect, once we get Jason Giambi, can we even afford to keep him, right? It's like, no, we have to figure out a way to bring in players that are sort of like, other valued. So that's the first step is like, and like one of those sacred cows was simple things that like people thought were not valuable, but actually were. So they looked at, the data, they created all these like new types of metrics. But it starts with just saying like, data is inherently like so valuable, but it's not valuable if everyone is looking at the same data, right? It's like if everybody thinks like, cost per lead is the best way to drive revenue, and everyone is driving their cost per lead down. And if you said, actually, I don't think cost per lead is valuable. I think I could spend 3 more times cost per lead than anybody else, but my leads are going to close better than everybody's, right? For example, that I can close them 10 times faster or whatever. That you look at the metrics that you can, you sort of take what everybody's looking at and look at it differently. And I think that's the first thing that Billy Beane did, was just say, like, there's all these sacred cows in baseball. Baseball's a super old school game. And like everybody, the scouts all look for the same thing. And like, yes, of course, finding that, diamond in the rough is great, but we can't afford to go pay for those people in free agency at all. So we have to find free agents that can cobble that together. And to say, okay, the outcome that we're looking for is not a 5-tool prospect. The outcome that we're looking for is a certain number of runs driven, or like on base percentage, or actually scoring runs, right? And I will take the deficiencies in other ways if we can cobble together 3 or 4 players that give me the output of runs scored, which is what we're actually trying to achieve, right? It's like knowing what you're trying to achieve is like, we're trying to score runs, because if we don't do that, we can't win. It's like the point of baseball is not to collect the most 5-star players or 5-tool prospects. That's not the point of the game. The point of the game is to score more runs than your opponent.
Exactly. I mean, and so to translate marketing, we can sit here saying, I need 800 MQLs. I had 600 last year. I want to grow the number of MQLs. In the end, it's how many of those MQLs turn into really opportunities or new business, right? And that's what we focus on, right? We started like everybody else, kind of look at all the numbers. We're getting great metrics from a digital advertising perspective. Our SEO is looking good. We're getting all these data points like everybody else. It all looks good. But really, when you water it down to what matters to the company, it's which of these leads paid off and turn into new business, right? And so sitting there, and honestly, they don't want to hear about the rest of it. They'll listen to you for a little bit, but all they want to see is the pipeline and the pipeline converting, even though that's not really marketing's responsibility, right? We have this discussion with our sales leaders all the time. Marketing creates the opportunities, but in the end, the sales have to go close those opportunities, and they will kind of muddy those waters and say, well, these deals didn't close. Well, they were real deals, real opportunities. So,
yeah, I mean, and I think that what Billy Beane was able to do there is to say, hey, we're going to focus on the metrics that actually do matter, that like really matter to the outcome, and sort of shift kind of perceptions there. And then the second thing that he had to do was get everybody aligned on this is the way, right? Like, this is actually how you do this. And that, which is painstakingly painted just absolutely beautifully in the film, is him in the meeting where they're all together, which is like one of the great scenes. And everybody's like, you're full of shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, that guy can't catch. That guy can't throw. Why do we want him on the team? He's like, yeah, because he hits dingers, baby.
There's fundamental red flags that everybody sees except for you, and you're the boss. This doesn't make sense.
What is happening in Oakland?
It defies everything we know about baseball.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be like if there's a customer that openly tells you they hate every single feature of your product but one, and you're like, they hate our product. They even post online about how much they hate our product. And it's like, are they paying? Yeah. Well, they're still a paying customer. How quickly did that deal close? Oh, it was a one-call close. Wait, so maybe that one feature that they are paying for is actually what our product is. Because everybody who signs up for that one feature closes way faster. And maybe all the other stuff that we think are the features are not actually the features.
It's interesting too, because, let's say Moneyball had been established for a few years. Like you said, everybody's got the same spreadsheet or drawing the same conclusions. You can sit there and say, Billy Beane could, by the beginning of the season, say, here's the team you've got. Barring any injuries, you should win X amount of games. And my job here is done. Art, you take over. And that's where, marketing handing off to sales, Art being the sales leader, go manage the team that I built you, and you should win 102 games. And if you fall short of that, you fail to do your job properly. That's not how it works, right? So he had to continue working the same way marketing has to work for sales, adapt throughout the year, have conversations about how this is supposed to work. I mean, that's the aspect I like it too, right? It's not I've done my job and it's over to you now. It's how do I continue doing my job? How do I continue having an impact? And how do we tweak as three go? Because this our season is never over.
Yeah,
it's not. It's ongoing, and we have to make progress all the time.
Yeah, and I think just like getting everyone excited about the outcome. I think that there's a way that I think Billy Beane could have gone about it. In the film, that's he's clearly a little abrasive in the film in the way that he approaches it, and I think there's a way to say like, hey, no, we have an exciting new way of doing things that allows us to compete, with teams that have more money than us, but we have to, we have to do things a different way. It reminds me of the 76ers with like trust the process. And the process was that we have to do every single thing that we can to maximize our draft assets to get the best picks for the Philadelphia 76ers. And Sam Hinkie says, hey, trust the process. They're tanking. They get all these picks. They finally land Joel Embiid. And the process there was maximize getting superstars. Because if you look at historically in the NBA, superstars are the things that win you championships, right? You get 2 or 3 of the best players in the NBA. If you have 3 of them, like you have a really, really good chance of winning a championship. Okay, great. That was the process. Now, getting everybody on board was about trust the process, right? If Billy Beane had said, like, this is called Moneyball, this is what we're doing, it's a new process, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to get fired, and you can blame me. If it does work, you can take all the credit. You know what I mean? Like, that probably would have went down a little better. Now, flash forward to the 76ers, and it obviously didn't work, and Sam Hinkie's gone. However, what the Oklahoma City Thunder did was they got rid of 3 superstars, not intentionally, but over the course of the years. They had the 3 superstars. They got rid of them all, and then they just traded for more and more and more and more and more picks. And what it turns out is that what can win you a Super Bowl or what can win you an NBA championship in 2025 is actually that your worst player on your team needs to be amazing. That if you can have 5 extremely good players and one of them is a superstar, that actually is enough to win a championship in 2025. Whereas the teams who had 2 or 3 superstars, their worst player was getting exposed over and over and over again in the playoffs, which is kind of a soccer thing. And
there's a long series, and you need some depth. Yep. You need a very deep team to go deep in the playoffs.
And to your point, that's like tweaking this system, this trust the process thing that other people had said, which is, hey, get a bunch of draft picks and then try to hit a home or try to get, the moonshot player. Whereas they said, well, get a bunch of draft picks, but also all those draft picks are just going to turn into really good, cheap players if you have enough of them. And that's what ended up winning it. So it wasn't the iteration, it was the iteration of the iteration that sort of gets you to that point. And I think that, like, again, that starts with like the foundational understanding of the way to win this game. In one way to win this game, the way that we're going to try to win this game is to win through the draft and to get as many picks as possible. Whereas for Billy Beane, it was like, fine, the original was like, we're going to develop these metrics that we think other people are looking at. Your batting percentage, we're going to look at your slugging percentage. We're going to look at, your wins above replacement. We're going to create all these metrics that we think are important that nobody else knows about and use your data-driven. Because the thing is, people talk about like sports or like baseball, like it wasn't data-driven. Baseball was the most data-driven.
That always been. Yeah, that's the funny thing. There's. I watched it again yesterday to refresh myself, and I was like, at some point, somebody's like, you're using data. Like that's always been data-driven. Yep. It's just different data.
Yeah, it's just that the data that's popularized. I mean, you remember, you go to baseball games and there are people who, take the cards and they take the stats while the game is going. You know what I mean? That's what you used to do at games. It was so data driven, but everybody believed in, batting percentage, hits, runs, RBIs, stolen bases, like these things. There's the same group of metrics that everybody was using. And when you turn it on its head, when you get internal buy-in, And then once you iterate on that a few times, you get to the point and you say, oh, wow, now we have something that, we can win 100 games. The other thing that I got to say, so then the final piece of this is that I teased at the beginning. I was an A's fan. I was there for it was, I can't remember if it was game 18 or 20, but I was there, and I think it was Jeremy Giambi, but I can't remember. Or maybe it's somebody else. Dang it, now I'm not remembering. But anyways, I was there in the left bleachers when they hit the walk-off home run. I should have looked this up.
Well, in the movie, if it's true, then it was Hatteberg hitting in the 20th game.
Yeah, but I don't think it was Hatteberg in real life. I can't remember.
Well, when he came off the bench, it's like, he's your starting first baseman. Why is he coming off the bench? In the movie, they play it that way. It didn't make any sense. Yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was a different player coming off the bench to hit something during Liberties in Hollywood.
Yeah, they do. And I'll get into that here in a second. But I was there. And I remember we were so pissed as a fan base going into that year, because I think that's the year after we lost Giambi. And I think we still had Miguel Tejada, who I think that they gloss over in the movie, who had won the MVP. And we had the three of the best pitchers in baseball also. That's the reason why we were so good. So we had these three amazing pitchers. Oh no, so Hatteberg did get the walk-off in the 20th.
So then, they just stayed some truth, yeah. But yeah, you guys lost Damon and I think Isringhausen and obviously Giambi.
Yeah, and Giambi. And I'm telling you, people were pissed. It was, especially because the visceral reaction of watching Jeremy Giambi, long hair, dirty beard. He's very Oakland. He's just kind of a dirty, grubby dude. And you'd go to the games and he's playing with his brother who's on the team. The players would race RC cars between innings. It was just a very, very sort of fun vibe. And to see him, and he had a huge Harley, I think. And then he goes to the freaking Yankees and he has to be clean shaven. He cuts his hair and he's driving a white Mercedes and he's wearing pinstripes. And you're like, this sucks so much. So we were low. And then to have that season come back and say, oh, we're actually better. Yeah, it was just really cool and special. And then when we lost to Tejada, it was super brutal. And I said I was going to never watch baseball again. But I think that but to the point there is and people always say oh, they lost Giambi, blah, 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 blah. But it's but there's also the alternative timeline, which is the next year you pay Tejada. You pay the pitchers, you pay all the people, you go get outside investment and say, we're going to be committed to actually making this go the distance. And it sort of reminds me of when a private equity company comes in and sort of extracts the value from a startup rather than investing in growth. And the biggest takeaway from Moneyball for me is once you have the secrets, once you have the special hidden formula and you see you have the traction, you see that it's working, then you invest everything in growth. And that was the biggest mistake that the A's made is they did all this stuff and then they never actually invested in growth. And therefore, how can you win? Right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we never have.
Yeah, Billy Beane turned down the offer from the Red Sox, snuck around. I mean, you've got an amazing fan base. You've got a great marketplace. You've got a general manager who's loyal, which is big in the majors, right? That's very rare. Somebody's turning all that money down. Give them a little something to work with. I would love to have seen it. The filming credits at the end is the next year he actually the owner gave him an extra $10 million to work with. But you never see that, right? And you probably not based on what the owner's like. But you'd like to think somebody would be rewarded.
He's the absolute worst. He's the absolute worst owner in sports. And I would say he's a terrible person because of what he did to the franchise. And I'm biased. But whether or not you agree with me or not, he didn't invest in the freaking team. And it's your team just won 100 games. What are we going to do? Oh, beloved player, Tejada, we recruited him when he was supposedly 15. Turns out he was actually 17. Oh, this whole story. And then you let him walk. It's just thing after thing like that. And you're that's just not good stewardship. And the fact that there's a what if this team actually got an investment, a real investment, is one of the biggest what if Billy Beane actually got the big check? It's crazy.
Well, and then just the leadership skills of Billy Beane the next year to come back and be like, okay, guys, we're starting over. Like we're professionals. We're going to do this. Doesn't matter. We get the extra players or not. We going to get the extra money or not. We gotta go back. We can do this. We won 100 games 2 years in a row. It's probably pretty good motivational, leader to come in there and be able to get them motivated again, because those are gut wrenching, game 5 losses. And like you said, they didn't invest. They didn't give him that thing that might have motivated the team to, give him something to work with. And that just didn't happen.
Okay. I found the answer. Miguel Tejada walked off the 18th. And then Hatterberg walked off the 20th. Okay. And I don't remember which one I was at, because they're both to the left field wall, but I was at one or the other. And I was in the bleachers.
I'm sure that was a crazy environment.
That's so crazy.
It was so sick. I can't even. It was just the coolest thing. But yeah, you can see why they made the Hatterberg thing, obviously, for the movie.
Yeah, you did talk about basketball, so I'll talk about football for a second. I was at the Texas Longhorns versus the USC Rose Bowl game.
Oh my gosh.
We won on 4th down. So I will say, I'm sure the 18th or 20th game, home run, awesome. But winning on 4th down against USC was pretty sick too. So yeah, what a feeling that was.
That's one of the, maybe the best college football game ever.
I'd say top 3, but I definitely, I'm a little biased, but I think that was two Heisman winners on the field, Vince Young,
Reggie Bush, unreal. Yeah, I was a Cal fan, and we lost to that USC team with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback for Cal. It was tough. Okay, correction. The Hatterberg home run was to right field. So I was definitely at the 18 game. I was at the Tejada game, because I remember his left field. And no listeners listening at this point.
And the listeners might come back to you you're hey, you're wrong.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah. But the
internet sleuths are out there.
The reason why I bring it up, though, I think it is important, because I had a lived-in experience for all this stuff, because I have mixed emotions about Moneyball because of what I've sort of mentioned. And I think that this is an important thing for marketing, which is, and for companies in general, is if you don't really give yourself a shot, if you do all the work and you do everything and you don't really give yourself a shot, and you're not really doing something in service to your fans or to your audience or to your customers, it's worth going that extra bit. And it's a story so good they made a movie about it, right? The best ending to the movie would have been if they won the freaking World Series the next year. But that didn't actually happen. And they never even got a shot to do that. And so that's part of it that for me is winning 20 games in a row was sick, and it was proof that we could do it. I get that. But that's not the job of marketing. The job of marketing it's not to be the person who gets a documentary about your company that your company raised the most money ever. It's to be the company that IPOs successfully. You know what I mean? Okay, I have one other thought on this. So they make this Hollywood movie, which is awesome. And I think they distill a lot of it down to very digestible sort of, bite-sized pieces and enactments and different sort of things. And I think it's important to just say Moneyball becomes mainstream with the book, but it becomes understandable to the masses when they see Moneyball, the movie. You know what I mean? And telling the Hollywood version of your own story with characters and effectively like that is the thing that makes people remember it. Reading Moneyball, the book, I'm sure people will be oh, dude, I read Moneyball and it's awesome, right? But the story is the thing that makes it sort of settle into your mind. And I think that that's just such an important piece for marketers, right? It's it's your story to tell. Tell it the way that you think it should be told. And if you need to streamline some things and cut some things and give it a Hollywood treatment, then you got to do that. But you got to tell the best story possible so that people actually understand the lesson. You did all the work. You created Moneyball. You created this great story. Now you need to make sure people actually freaking remember it and can know the lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. Years ago, I had to work on this campaign, and it was our 50th anniversary at Leidos. And they said they wanted to do some sort of campaign that would take Leidos on the road. They didn't really have a lot of, haven't figured out. They knew they wanted to educate our employee base as well as our customer base about what it is that Leidos is. And this is this is a $10 billion government contractor. We do intel, we do space, we do, aeronautics, we do IT for a lot of different government functionality. So how do you tell those disparate solutions or, case studies to all the audiences? And at first it was, this is an engineering company, so we have to be very technical and we have to talk about schematics and we have to talk about the details about it. And as a storyteller, I said, this is no way it's going to work. The medical person is not going to understand what the supersonic missiles are all about, right? We can sit there and talk about the weight and the gravity and the distance and all the stuff. That's not going to work. So a perfect example is, we built this microwave frequency that they put on top of Humvees, and from a safe distance that could detonate IEDs, right? Which is at the time, causing a lot of damage to our troops and casualties. And there was the approach of putting engineering schematics on there and talking about everything, but who's going to remember that? So we gamified it and we put this in a 53-foot trailer, went around the US, like 12 different demos. And we showed basically a Humvee going from one base to another, safely detonating IEDs on the screen. And if I'd done the schematics and I'd done the engineering approach, 1% of the people that saw that will remember that we did that. But by gamifying it, probably half the people that went through it and played that game will remember Leidos, are saving our troops by creating technology to save them and make their deployment safer. So, and we did that across 12 different solutions. And it is our responsibility as storytellers of not just giving the business what they want, but also giving the audience what they need to hear, right? And that's very difficult to do because sometimes a business can be very persuasive about what they want. But you have to, as a marketer, explain to them that this is going to not work. And maybe that's why Billy Beane at the beginning didn't bother telling anybody what he was going to do, because he knew they'd say no. But eventually, it got them on board when it started working. We have to look out for both sides of that. And it's not always an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I love that. Anything else on Moneyball? I feel like we've covered some ground.
No, I just, back to that community, I always thought that was probably his biggest failure, was that he was, if the personality the persona that they demonstrate in the movie is true, kind of arrogant, kind of difficult to work with, did have this history on his shoulder. But if you're really going to make change, you have to communicate that. It doesn't matter if I'm talking to the most junior person on my team or the most senior person, and then beyond my team, the leadership, you have to communicate what you're trying to establish if you're doing things differently. Right. Otherwise, they're used to something being a certain way. The longest way, the second you start doing something different, they're not getting what they're used to. Even if what they were getting didn't work, which relates back to Billy Beane, they didn't win a World Series. So you're trying something different. They still were used to their 90 plus wins a year. Right. Yep. They were used to their crowds coming in, their audience not being too angry, even if they lost their star players. Our leadership is used to certain things. Doesn't matter what company I ever worked for, they're used to certain things. And if you're trying to change them, you don't communicate that, that's not going to work. I would tell you, the CEO of Leidos, when we tried to do this 53-foot trail around the US, we didn't communicate to him that we were going to take this gamified approach. He was an engineer by trade. He was expecting to walk into that trailer and have a bunch of schematics and demos and very detailed engineering discussions. And fact is, I couldn't send engineers on the road with this truck for 3 months, right? I had to hire marketing people typed that were affordable that could go. So they had to be able to explain this to the average Joe going through the trailer and how this was, repeatable. So he walked in and at first sight was not thrilled with what he saw, right? Luckily, went home, thought about it, came back, gave us a second chance, explained why we took the approach of gamifying, right? This is probably the same thing as everybody else. It would have been better if I had briefed him, and this was a project that took 6 months. I would have liked to have briefed him along the way. Probably should have learned my lesson. But that's the thing, is if you're going to change things, communicating, getting buy-in, explaining what you're doing, you're going to get more people on board faster, and you're going to get your results, I believe, faster than if you do it on your own.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I don't know Billy Bean, obviously. I don't know, how it was behind the scenes, but I do think that, in a bigger organization, it's like, I think you really have to sell the story. You have to market the marketing a lot more effectively than I think he did, for sure,
It looks like two people went off in a room, came up with a strategy for a few months, came out and said, this is it, and didn't bother explaining to anybody else. And if that is true, oh boy. But, at the same time, I think somebody in the room said, he's a guy, and he responds to God and the boss, and that's it. So what he decides, we got to roll with. But most people don't think that way.
Yeah, and I do think I think it's really tough because Art Howe, it's his career too, right? You do have to be respectful of that, right? It's like Art Howe doesn't get to, unless he's just going to go into media and say, Billy Bean made me do all this stuff, which he's not probably going to do. So it is tough, right? It's it's their job too, right? If you're the marketing person, you want to do some super crazy out of the box thing, and your CRO goes, hey, I don't really want to do that. It's my job too, that does matter, But that being said, if you're painting the picture and saying what we're doing isn't working, it's like it does. You do have to say, do you have an idea of how we can compete asymmetrically? We're getting crushed by our competitors.
Yeah. But I think obviously different scenario in the marketing world. But I do believe there's an expectation now. This is not 20, 25 years ago marketing, right? We have marketing automation was developed, and I think that was a game changer for us, right? Talk about technology coming and playing a huge role. I was just starting to move over from my first half of my career is communication. I was just moving over to marketing and reading about this marketing automation. And, my entire career was what value does this communications bring, right? And we're like, oh, well, number of mentions, positive overview of how we're seeing what's going on in the market. Those are not statistics that the world care about. It's definitely not your CRO. But you can come in here now as a marketing person, as the last 5-10 years, and start talking about pipeline generated and number of leads and especially bookings from marketing activities. That's a game changer. Right?
Yeah.
You can start arguing for more budget. You can start arguing for more people. And so I think to me, marketing automation was a big reason I've enjoyed doing marketing more than I did communications, because you can have those conversations at the table and people take you seriously, because you're not just talking about, we had 117 mentions last year and we now have 130. Nobody cares about your 10% increase in mentions, or the fact that you had 7 billion social media, coverage.
Yeah.
Those numbers don't mean anything to anyone. But with marketing automation, being able to track pipeline, game changer. And I was an early adopter, and I would tell my colleagues and other departments, guys, you've got to get on board with this, because if you're not, you're falling behind. And I think that's where, Billy Bean was maybe the first to adopt what was written in the book, but ultimately the Red Sox did it and did it better because they spent a little bit more money too. So, we're expected to come up with ideas. And I think that, especially nowadays, you're supposed to look at what's going on in the market. You're supposed to find better ways of doing things. And you're supposed to bring those ideas to the leadership team. And they don't want the status quo all the time.
Yeah. Scott, any other final thoughts on sort of marketing and thoughts on how marketers should think about, fighting asymmetrically or
just, one other aspect we did talk about the movie to me was preparedness, right? I mean, I feel like when they started hitting their stride, they were talking more, they were discussing this. And this is something I've talked about my team. We go out of our way to over communicate with each other with what's going on, or at least I think so. My team might argue when they see this, but I think we do a really good job of getting on the same page and understanding each other's roles, what we do. And we do what we call a series called LDX, which are customer events. Right? We're a financial services firm, so we do them in New York, Paris, London, Hong Kong. And we bring in our most important customers, for thought leadership, half day or full day event. And, we kind of over prepare. And we're told repeatedly, you guys are not stressed. What's up? And well, we over prepared. We got here and we said, no matter what goes wrong, and we always say it's an event with 100+ people, something will go wrong. The level of how bad it goes is usually on the low end anyway. But we're prepared. And so we can show up and, we might be tired, but we got a happy face on and we knocked the event out of the park. And it's only because we knew what we were doing all along. And, that's for an event and a live day, but that's the approach throughout the year, is if we all know what we're supposed to do and we all know what our rules are, and we have the ability to be a multi, back to baseball, we're not a singular, tool player. We have people that can do more than one thing because we're a small company. So we all wear multiple hats. Well, everybody's able to better understand than sometimes I experienced larger companies when somebody had a very specific role, they would say, my job stops here, and wouldn't pay attention to what happened to that thing beyond, to that activity or campaign beyond that. And I feel like I like this environment where we're a small market company or marketing organization because we know everything that's going on. And if somebody stepped out tomorrow, got sick or something, two people could stand in and know exactly what that person's up to, what their role is to change positions on the field. So yeah, I think marketing easily relates back to sports in general, especially baseball. Of it is very individualistic on the baseball field, right? You've got, you play first base, you're covering that area, but if you can move around, help the team, it helps.
Scott, what's your best piece of advice for a CMO is trying to figure out, how content and brand fit into their marketing strategy?
Well, brand is difficult, right? That's real specific to each company. I'd say, for us, the way we approach it and the way I approach it is credibility, right? And that plays back to the brand and the content aspect of is you can't overproduce content and you can't have marketing people producing content, right? AI is this sort of game changer now. Marketing automation for marketing was, game changer 10 years ago. AI is sort of the unknown right now, right? And we're all trying to figure out, we all have access to it. We're all trying to find the best way of doing it. Early on, I was a little more conservative about it because my biggest fear was, oh my God, we're going to potentially create, 5 blogs a week versus the 2 or 3 we produce a month now. And there's going to be expectation that we produce all this additional content, but we're going to lose credibility in the market. And so what we've done is make sure that we are producing perhaps different versions of it. So if we create a white paper, for example, and before we might have just written a blog, now we can extrapolate some of that and create videos, and we can create infographics, and you can use AI to do that. But overall, I'm not looking to drastically increase the amount of core pieces of content because you lose credibility. You have to have credibility, right? If we suddenly increased our output 5-fold, we would lose that credibility. So we very much have stayed steadfast to how we create our content, but again, using AI to find different ways to spread out to different channels.
Awesome. Scott, it's been wonderful having you on the show. For our listeners, you can go check out Linedata. Scott, any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
This is great. Look, my first podcast, I'd say if you're thinking about doing one, do it. And if you're thinking about doing one, do it with Ian and Meredith, because this has been great for me. So, yes. as a first timer, again, you got to try doing new things, right? So this has been great. And I really appreciate the conversation and, talk about marketing, which I'm very passionate about, obviously, is my career, and baseball. This has been great.
You are a natural. I would have never known. Thanks again for joining, Scott. We really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Later. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.